So June, you actually might like this. Or
Uh,
um awesome. Are you an engineer too?
And yeah,
What do you do?
electrical engineer.
Okay, so have you guys ever heard the MVP notion?
Yeah.
So June looks excited. What is the MVP in Silicon Valley?
minimal viable product.
Hmm.
So
So
it's yeah.
so if we
Sorry,
take
go
this notion to photography, a minimum viable image, how would you guys describe this? What does that mean?
Move all the distractions and just have minimum possible.
Yeah, the minimum possible. What do you think, Aaron? What is a minimum viable image? How would you define that?
Would that be just like a very simple image
Hmm.
without a lot of noise?
Hmm. What do you think, Patrick?
Yeah, it's that this is what I need, and everything else is superfluous and doesn't need to be there.
Hmm. So cutting out the superfluous. Dylan, what would you say is a minimum viable image?
I'm not exactly sure, but going off of what like Patrick just said, probably just like the most basic composition, uh, something like that. I'm really not sure.
Hmm. What do you think, June?
Well, minimum viable product is something that's, you know, at a state where a product is at a state where it's presentable.
Hmm.
You know, it may not have all the features, it may not be perfect, but it's good enough so that you could call that by itself a product. So borrowing from that,
Hmm.
minimum viable image would be something that ticks off all the essential boxes.
Hmm.
It has a subject, it has a composition, it has an antagonist,
Hmm.
it has an eye flow, right?
It has a
may
what?
not be
Eye
an eye
flow?
flow, like
Eye flow?
your eye will be following the trace. That's kind of how I would define it.
Uh-huh.
I guess that's kind of different from what we discussed so far.
Well, I know I love it because actually this is where I find studying Silicon Valley, like image processing and computer vision, very interesting because the, you know, thank God for the nerds, right? The nerds have figured out good terms to describe how we see the world, and because like we've always done, it's like yo, like this is my eye flow, this is how I look at things, right? But you don't know what you're doing until there's a word for it. Because I'm like, oh man, I've been doing this my whole life. Thank God someone invented a term. And so even these concepts I'm introducing to y'all is that anything that could spark kind of new creative insights in terms of how to see the world and stuff like that, I think is quite a good thing. Oh, hey Linda, how you doing?
I'm doing good, thank you.
I love your hair.
Thank you. I need
Okay.
a haircut.
Okay. Oh, so talking about minimal viable image. So the reason why I love this notion is that I think we tend to get too caught up in making a picture perfect photo with all the details and da, da, da. But then truth be told, okay, raise your hand if you have a smartphone. Right? Okay, this is a sad reality. 99% of people are looking at your photos through a 4-inch screen. So as a consequence, they're not going to see the small details in your pictures. And so like what I would actually recommend is, this is what I like to call the small thumbnail test. So what is the small thumbnail test? So the small thumbnail test is in which small thumbnail test is if you know, okay, how do you know if your photos are good or not? The way you know your photos are good or not is if you look at your photos as small thumbnails, if the photo still evokes emotion or mood in your photographs, it probably means it's a good photograph. And it's actually funny because you could even see a photo super duper small and you still kind of get a good gist of what's about. And so even nowadays when I'm looking at my photos through like, you know, Lightroom or Photos or even on my iPad or whatever, I try to actually intentionally look at them as small thumbnails. And so what you could even do is like if you guys have a Mac, right? You know, there's these different ways that you can look at through your photos. Actually, quite been enjoying this view here, this contact sheet like view, because you can kind of get a general sense of the composition of your images. Like, oh, you know, I could see a lady. You know, and then the human eye is amazing. Is that we could detect a human face from almost like half a mile away. I'm sure there's something in our human DNA. So, you know, I know that's a laughing lady. You know, I look through this, I know that's a laughing lady. I know that's a human. Or just like even with compositions, like bold, bright, and visual. So like this image of Cindy. So that's one thing that's really important in photography, because I think, and then the really optimistic thought is then you don't really need the world's best camera with the most megapixels, the whatevers, because as long as you focus on this minimum viable image, I think it's actually going to be much more motivational to your photographs. So we were talking about stress testing our images. So if I could give you guys some fun activities and assignments, what y'all could do. So do you guys have Photoshop?
Yeah.
All right. If you don't have Photoshop, you could just download like a 15-day trial. And so one of the fun activities that I actually like to do in Photoshop is, especially if you guys are all stuck in quarantine or whatever, right? This is one activity. In filters, there's like a quadrillion different filters that we could do to our images. So your assignment is you have to choose a photograph that you like and apply every single Photoshop filter to your image. And as a consequence, it will actually help you better understand what makes your photographs interesting. So I have different examples, right? So like, for example, this mosaic one, it's kind of cool because you guys ever play on like a Super Nintendo or a Nintendo or Pac-Man? Essentially, you're making your artwork into 8-bit, right? So that's kind of crazy that this composition, it's a good composition because I could turn it into a mosaic and I could still kind of get a general gist of what's going on in the composition. Pretty cool, right? And so I spent about an hour this morning stress testing my own images. So it's so funny because like this is like one of these really old photos that I shot almost 2009. This is like I shot this photograph when I was like 21, and I was just like, I just graduated college and I was in Korea for the first time. So what I did was I took my image and I applied all these different filters to it, and I just kept adding filters. This one's like edge detect. And, sorry?
I just said I really like that last one.
Which one? This one?
That one.
Oh, what do you like about it, Patrick?
It feels like a panel out of a comic book, a good graphic
Ooh.
novel.
Oh, that's also a good thing too. If you want to study good compositions, comic books actually and graphic novels are actually a good source of inspiration. And so I'm visually testing it, and essentially what we're trying to do with composition, it's called edge detection, where you're trying to detect the edges and the contours of your photographs, because if it's too difficult for you to detect in the edges and the sides of the photographs, it tends to make the photos much more difficult. So this is like embossed, right? So you could kind of get a general sense of like the edges of the composition, which means that it's good. And then just like, you know, all these different filters and stuff like that. Even this is actually another theory I have too, is have you guys ever shot film, like the 35 millimeter film?
I've been doing a lot of it the last 2 weeks again.
Oh, cool. So typically most people think that film photos look better than digital photos, right? And I've always wondered, why does film photos with all the grain and grit and the stuff, why does it look more beautiful than digital? And this is my theory. So my theory is when a photograph is more gritty and obscure and there's more noise, it forces you, the viewer, to actually use your brain power to try to decipher the image and see what's going on. So as a consequence, you're actually more engaged with the photograph and you're actually more interested in it. Interesting theory, right? So contrary to what we've been taught, maybe the best photos are actually the ones which are like a little bit imperfect or a little bit obscure in some sort of way. There's this Italian word called chiaroscuro, which essentially means like high contrast, low contrast, but it means obscure, clear. And so you need some parts of your photo which are obscure, but also some parts of your photo which are clear. So sometimes I think adding grain to your photos digitally is actually an effective tool for that. And this is actually an interesting filter too. This is where I add like max noise. Even though you add like a ton of noise, you could still kind of get a sense of what the image is. You could still see the lady and you could still see the outline of the lady here, the leading lines. And so through stress testing, what you're trying to do is you're trying to intentionally mess up your image and trying to get to a point where it's no longer an image. So these are all the different filters I've applied to my images.